Anyone can follow. It takes something special to be an original, which is why the 2025 Lincoln Navigator SUV arrives with new ways of surrounding you in luxury, including the ultra-wide 48-inch panoramic display and the multi-sensory Lincoln Rejuvenate experience. A true original never stops evolving. So meet the 2025 Navigator, the original that's all new and better than ever. Learn more at Lincoln.com. Lincoln and Navigator are trademarks of Ford or its affiliates.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn and welcome to Howie the podcast. And as we build up to our first Monday night football of the season at the Stadium of Light as we take on Everton, we couldn't ask for anyone better to speak to than our guest today, considering his relationship with the two clubs. An unbelievable midfielder who made 146 appearances for the Merseyside club, which included 57 games in a single season in 1984-85, when Everton were one result away from completing the treble way before Fergie's United. He then went on to help Sunderland get promoted to the top flight twice in the 1990s, made a total of 270 appearances for Sunderland, as well as being assistant manager twice. And you could probably add another few roles he held with us along the way, because you probably guessed we are very pleased to welcome Paul Bracewell. Hello, Paul.
Good afternoon. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, good stuff. And I mentioned in that intro, if only Norman Whiteside hadn't been so talented, you might have had a treble on your CV.
Yeah, it went to extra time, and to be fair, it was a good goal because at the time Nev was one of the best goalkeepers in the world. So, and I think the replay was due on the Thursday, and I'm sure, hopefully, if we'd have won that, it would have been a lovely treble. But then we won the Charity Shield as well, so there's been 4 trophies that year. So,
yeah, it wasn't a bad goal. You're absolutely right. I mean, was it that a weird one actually when you think about it? That you had that fantastic season, but people say, "Oh, you missed out."
Well, to be fair, it was an unbelievable week. We'd won the league on the Saturday, Cup Winners' Cup on a Wednesday, and then obviously the cup final on the Saturday. So not a bad week. Just so disappointed not to be able to finish on a high, you know.
Being disappointed with just doing the double. I mean, that's Cup Winners' Cup. I mean, that's still not bad, is it? But since you're disappointed with it, but just in the modern day, I know you've been an elite development coach for Growth Football for a lot of years, but I saw you left Spurs in the summer, and then I was reading that you had a lot of offers on the table, according to some of the reports. But what you up to now?
Yeah, I left Tottenham. I was there for nearly 10 years. Really enjoyed my time there. John McDermott, who's now the technical director of the FA, took us in, working with the 21s all the way down to the under 12s, developing the talent. And I think, as you can see, we've produced some, or they have produced some real good young players. And one or two of the lads that work with me have been in around the first team, which is always great to see. But you've got to move on. I've finished the sporting director's course in the summer. So I was really pleased to do that. It was a 2-year course with the PFA. So I'm now looking to be a more of a senior role at a football club. And I've spoken to one or two people, and there's one or two things on offer. So I've just got to make sure I make the right choice.
Yeah, brilliant. You hear lots of more from managers than from your side, but there's a lot of talk about when people kind of get a new job that actually it's more emphasis on looking at the right club and the right opportunity that allows you to actually do your job properly, because there's seemingly a lot of clubs that don't allow, they bring people in, but put a lot of restrictions on them where people can't do their jobs.
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things that I've always sort of believed in, and the course really sort of emphasised that is your recruitment of people, not only as players but as staff. It's vital important you get it right. And if you get it wrong, as we've seen many times, it can be disastrous. So you've got to take your time, and it works both ways. You've got to work with people that you can trust and have that belief. So like I said, the recruitment side is really, really important.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely get into more of that, Paul. Don't worry about that. But we'll get into the two clubs, and we'll start with Everton, because I just wanted to start off by talking about the fact you were officially honoured by being included in the club's Hall of Fame, along with Kevin Sheedy, Derek Mountfield and Andy Gray at Goodison Park back in February, which must have been a really special thing, especially because last season was the last season at Goodison. And I was looking at it, and I think it was Peter Reid who handed you your award on the pitch as well.
Yeah, it was a fantastic day. And I think, to be fair, one of the things that enabled me to do coming out of Tottenham was to be able to go to some of these functions. I think it was over 30 years since we won the league. And obviously, it was the last game at Goodison Park. So it was a fantastic occasion, and it was always a great honour to be honoured in that way with with some great players as well. And it went really well. And then we had the opportunity again with Peter with Roma, the game they did before the first game of the season, and Peter was a manager, I was assistant, and in terms of the veterans, and even though the first team got beat, we won 2-0, and no, it was a fantastic occasion, and it's obviously very special when you get honoured that way.
Yeah. Well, Peter Reid's always on the socials with some of those players from that Everton side. It does seem like that Everton side almost, you can see when I was looking at the video of you on the pitch, you can all see that you're all still mates and you're all kind of all talking about, right, well, when do we next get together and all this. It seemed to still have that bond after all those years.
Yeah, I think it's always been a special bond, that 85 team. Any reunion. I mean, Adrian Heathey comes from America. Gary Stevens come from Australia. Obviously, Andy's away. He's in the Saudi. So, and we managed to get together for that event. And as you can imagine, a couple of glasses of wine as well, which went down well. But that was one of the reasons why I think we were so successful. And what Howard, again, goes back to my point earlier about people. Howard, he signed the right people, got the right balance. And if you can get it right, it just shows you what success you can have.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of Goodison Park, I've always in my head, I've got it down as one of these grounds like Villa Park that I used to love going to because it was what I almost called a proper football ground. And I'm not sure if that does make any sense. But, I remember Sunderland leaving Roker Park, and there were a lot of people who didn't want to leave Roker Park just because of the love of the place. I mean, was it a bit like that for Everton? Was it a tough move in that sense?
I think it's always tough when you look at all the clubs that have moved. I mean, Tottenham's a little bit different. They stayed, but they obviously rotated it. And I think it's always difficult to go from iconic stadiums to a new stadium. But to be fair, when you think the stadium alike, that's become a fortress. Obviously, the new stadium, Everton, has kept that football feel, and magnificent stadium. It's a fantastic setting. But ultimately, you've got to get results. And obviously, they got beat on Sunday. But, at the moment with Sunderland going, when you look at the stadium now, it doesn't look out of place with all these new ones that are getting built. So it just shows you the vision at the time to build a stadium like that. And, as I well know, there's 46,000 day in, day out. So there's no issues about not selling that.
Yeah, that's it. And actually, just looking back, I mean, you were a player and Peter Reid's assistant manager when Sunderland moved from Roker Park, and you actually played in the stadium's opening game against Ajax, so you experienced that firsthand. Yeah. But how is it, looking at Everton, how is it for a team and a coaching staff when clubs move stadiums? Because I imagine for a while, the new stadium doesn't really feel like home, does it?
No, and I think that's one of the things that I feel, and I'm probably speaking to the Everton players now, is they've somehow managed to capture it, and it's still a real football stadium. So when you go, it's a bit like any ground. When you're walking up, there's a real football feel about it, and to be fair, that they've kept that, which is very, very difficult to do. I know some of the other ones, the Emirates, took a while to get that feeling. Where I feel as though at Everton they've managed to capture that.
Yeah, so Sunderland are trying to get it back. We're putting a lick of paint on ours. It's unbelievably, it's over 25 years old, which scares the life out of me. But just into that stadium move, because I do wonder, because I remember moving to the stadium and Sunderland were actually relegated in that last season at Roker Park, and there were suggestions then that there was maybe more focus on the new stadium. Do you think that's maybe something that's happened over at Everton the last few years, where maybe there's been a slight loss of focus and taking your eye off the ball on the playing side when you are building a new stadium and you're making a big change like that?
I think that one of the main reasons why all new stadiums are built is because of revenue. So very similar to Roker Park, that capacity to what they've got now, and all the stuff that comes with it, sponsorship, and obviously TV rights. And very similar to Everton, it's been a difficult time where, yes, they're building a new stadium, but at the same time, they know what that can generate, which then will go back into the field. So it's a difficult one. It's difficult, if I remember, with Arsene Wenger doing that as well. He got to a stage where he knew they needed the money for the stadium, but managed to keep the team going. It's a very fine balancing act. But now, like Sunderland and Everton, they are now generating huge amounts of money, which will then get ploughed back into the team. So once you've made that move, hopefully it's all for the good.
Yeah, that's it. And you talked earlier about getting good people in terms of how important that recruitment is. And I was looking at Everton since David Moyes left to go to Manchester United all those years ago. I mean, some top managers: Roberto Martinez, Ronald Koeman, Sam Allardyce, Marco Silva, Carlo Ancelotti, Rafa Benitez. Huge names in the game. And at one point, they were one of the Premier League's big spenders. But it's almost when you go down that route sometimes, especially a club like Everton, do you almost lose a bit of identity when you keep changing direction so quickly like they did during that period?
Yeah, I'm not. Sometimes people talk about direction, but as well as I do, the game's all about results. If you're getting results, it's a great appointment. If you're not getting results, then we need to change it, and that's the nature of the beast, to be honest. But more often than not, if you can get again the consistency and win games, the longevity tends to be longer.
Yeah, that's it. Well, talking about longevity, David Moyes had 11 really good years at Everton before he left to go to Manchester United, and he returned to Everton back in January this year. And they say never go back, and obviously it wasn't relevant in your case with Sunderland, of course. But in terms of David Moyes, is it the case sometimes in football that certain players or certain managers are just really good fits at specific clubs?
Yeah, I think so. But again, it'll obviously. I think he did a fantastic job last season keeping them up. It was a difficult time for them, like you've just said there. Goodison Park, new stadium. It would have been a disaster, as we all know, if they hadn't stayed up and you go into that stadium. So that balance was right, and they're looking to move on. But again, it's going to take time. But I think with the experience he's had, obviously at West Ham, he's won a trophy, so he knows what it takes to win. He's got staff around him that he's worked with before. But ultimately now, again, it's all about results. And like I said, with disappointing results on Sunday, but they'll be looking to bounce back on Monday night.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I was looking at their games, and they've had Manchester City, Liverpool, and Spurs in the first 9 games, which makes up 3 of the 4 defeats. They're in the bottom half, but kind of only 3 points behind Chelsea, who are 9th. How do you think David Moyes is going to look at that start of the season? Do you think he's going to be obviously disappointed with defeats against the likes of Leeds? But do you think he'd be thinking that's a pretty solid start of the season?
I think if you take a step back going in terms of any new manager going having a pre-season and getting some players in, they've got another window coming up. I'm sure they'll be very active in that window as well. And it's a tough job. It's a tough league. You've got to keep going, and I'm sure, like come January, he'll be looking to strengthen and add to the squad. He hasn't got a big squad. I know that. And it's like anybody, you pick up a few injuries or suspensions, and and when you're playing sometimes Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, 3 games in a week, you pick 3 wins up, you're right up the table. If you get beat, it's all of a sudden there's a crisis.
Yeah. Well, and actually, talking about their squad and their turnover for all those years and the money that they've spent and the place they were at with the squad, they let quite a few players go in the summer, and time isn't something managers have now in football, as we all know. I don't know what the average is now. It used to be about, I think it was 12 months at one point, the average tenure of a football manager. But do you think David Moyes needs that time? Do you think he's going to need a few windows to really get the squad to where he wants it to be? Even though they've made big signings like Jack Grealish, and that they've spent, I think they spent over 100 million. But it takes a lot of time to turn a club around and move those players on that you don't need as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the owners have got full confidence in him, and because he's he sort of did that at West Ham, not so much at Sunderland. Sunderland was obviously a disappointing season, but given time, his experience, he knows what he wants, he knows how to get there. So I'm sure they're fully confident in another 18 months, 2 years' time to see where they're at. Like you
Mm.
said, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's going to take time, new stadium and all the stuff that comes with it. But like you said, the biggest thing in terms of generating that amount of money now with sponsorships off the field as well as on.
Yeah. Well, moving on to Sunderland, you were involved in one of our most famous playoff campaigns when we played our friends up the road in the semi-final and then took on Swindon and got beat, but still went up. But looking back at last season's playoff campaign, I mean, what did you make of the way Sunderland got promoted to the playoffs? Because, there's a couple of moments there that I don't think any Sunderland fan will ever forget who lived through it.
No, to be honest, I was at the Coventry game, and I think everybody at the club would say it was the supporters at the end got that goal. It was unbelievable. It was incredible, and that I'm sure took them that momentum into the final. They never say die as they did, but it was an unbelievable atmosphere. Sometimes the semi-finals, sometimes the semis are sometimes better than the finals. Having been in semi-finals myself and finals. Getting there sometimes is massive, and but no, I really enjoyed the night, and it was fantastic to get promotion.
Yeah, unbelievable night. I mean, just on the two games, because there's been a lot of conversation, and recently as well, there's been high-profile people saying recently that almost Sunderland didn't deserve to be there because of the way those games panned out. And you've been involved in so many games, and I imagine you've been involved in those. Not backs to the wall, but where you're defending and you know what you're doing and you're just waiting for that opportunity. Do you think that some of that criticism was harsh on Sunderland in that playoff campaign? That is saying, well, because we didn't have as much possession or territory, that actually we maybe didn't deserve to win the game, because there's different ways of playing a game out, isn't there, to get that result?
Yeah, I don't think anybody at Sunderland gives a monkeys. You know what I mean? It's in football. If you don't go up, then you're looking for bits and pieces. But if you're a Sunderland supporter, a Sunderland player, or owners, it's like fantastic, great, let's move on. That's the rules of the game. That's how it sets out. Get on with it.
Yeah,
Built.
Absolutely. Well, you as you said, you worked in the Spurs academy for so long, and you've coached young players for a lot of your coaching career. Looking back at the way Sunderland got promoted, how did you find the way Sunderland did it by focusing on, getting those young players in? Because our squad was so young in the Championship, we hardly spent any money. And actually, there's an argument to say if there's any league that you don't really do that, it's the Championship. But how did you find the way the Sunderland did that?
Well, Romain Mundell and Dennis Sirkin were obviously two of the lads that obviously I worked with. And during the time, people spoke to me about Dennis and Romain. So delighted for those two. Sometimes when you've got real young, athletic, fit young men, full of energy, full of running, it's good. Having worked in youth teams, 21 sort of down, you tend to get that. But obviously to deliver it in the Championship, when you've got to go 3 and 4 games a week, as a young player, you don't. It's great. When's the next game? So I think that worked really well for Sunderland, and also they don't really know what the pressure is. When you're young, you go out there and there's no real expectation. We talk about if you can get 150 league games on your belt at any level, then they tend to say you're going to have a career in your game. Now, some of these lads have just started off, and it's like anything when supporters like young players who come through the system. There's a real bond in there, and I think that's what drove them on. And then obviously they've got promotion, and they've sort of gone for more experience, and there's a nice balance in there as well, because the Premiership is unforgiving, and I think at the moment they've got it right.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of, the majority of Sunderland fans were surprised how much we ended up spending, best part of 200 million. But we all know, like, spending a lot of money, it doesn't guarantee anything, as we talked about earlier with Everton to a certain extent. But I think we shocked a lot of people by the mix of, high profile players like Xhaka, and then the young players like Noah Siddiqui in midfield, just to name one. But and I think he was on the radar of quite a few big clubs as well, but they were maybe waiting for another year. Were you surprised at how big Sunderland went in the summer?
I think, to be fair, hats off to Kirill, because what they've done, they've got the club in such a position and enable him to do it as well. With all this buying and selling, they've got themselves in I think in a situation where if they didn't go up, they didn't have to sell players, but if they went up, they could sell players, but also they could go out and spend the money. So that balance was again really good. And they've, like I said right at the very start, the recruitment's key, and it looks like at the moment, touch wood, they've got the recruitment really well.
Yeah, having just done your sporting director's course there, Paul. I mean, looking at Sunderland, is that almost because people have looked at Brighton and Bournemouth and Brentford over the years? I mean, Sunderland kind of drawn up a slightly new blueprint on maybe how to do things?
I think when you mention Bournemouth and Brighton, Sunderland's a massive club, and I don't think people realise what a big club that is, and it should be in the Premier League. It hasn't been there for a long time. Sometimes when you look at Brighton and you look at Bournemouth, they're doing magnificent to stay, a bit like Fulham. But Sunderland should be up there, and to be fair, they've done it. It took a while to get there, but at least they've got some real good, solid foundations. Because what you don't want to do is come straight back down again.
Yeah. Well, you've been involved, obviously, from a manager's point of view and in the backroom staff. And, we're talking about Sunderland spending a lot of money, and 13 players is a lot of players. And you've got a whole squad of young players who got you into the Premier League and got you in that position. And, best example is last season's captain, Dan Neil, who's really waiting for a chance in the Premier League. How difficult is that going to be to manage when you've got change going on that scale in one summer? And you've got all these young players who are chomping at the bit for a chance in the Premier League.
Well, you've just answered the question. They should all be chomping at the bit to play in the Premier League. And that's what's driving the first team lads. And that's where the competition comes. You've got players sitting there. If you're not producing, they get an opportunity. You might not get back in again. And when you're winning games, whatever you say, that squad will be driving the first 11. And they know that if they make a mistake or they don't play well or the results go against, these young lads will be in and they'll go, right, this is my shirt. I'm not going to give it up. So that's another great balance, and results always dictate how that's going to be, They'll be frustrated. I get that. They'll be frustrated, but they'll be, like you said, they'll be champing at the bit to give it a chance and play in the Premier League,
Yeah. Well, you've been in numerous kind of dressing rooms and know how these dressing rooms work and gel together, and you get that, team bonding like you did, like that Everton team we're talking about. But have you been surprised at all these players coming in from all over the world with Sunderland, and then yet you see them on the pitch this season, and they just seem like they're all in it together, they're all fighting together, they all know their role, and yet some of them have only been there, maybe a couple of months, but they seem like they've played together for years.
Yeah, and like I said at the very start, the recruitment side, so not only as a player, but also as a person, which is really, really important. So you've got to go digging, you've got to find some backgrounds, you've got to find out what they're like. And at the moment, like you said, the homework's been done well. They've just gelled together, which is fantastic. You've got young lads there desperate to get in the team, all good characters. So, but there's still a long way to go. It's a great start, and there's been some tests along the way, and they've come through. But if you speak to the management, I'm sure I saw his interview the other day after Chelsea, and he said, "I just want to get to that 40 mark." So that tells you where his mind is thinking. He's not getting carried away, and I'm sure he's making sure the players don't either. But hey, got to enjoy it. You go to Chelsea and get a great result. You must enjoy it, because I know the supporters would have done.
Oh yes. If you see some of the scenes from behind that goal, you'll know for a fact that people enjoyed themselves. But just looking at the new signings, it's really difficult to single people out. But Granit Xhaka's getting all of the headlines, and we're scratching our heads how the likes of Nori Mukele, Omar Alderete, maybe even Ronaldo weren't snapped up by bigger clubs. And we've got Noah Siddiqui in there, who I've mentioned already in that midfield. He's a proper throwback, where he's actually a midfielder who can actually attack and defend, because I don't think there's many of them about. But who's kind of caught your eye so far out of those new signings?
I think you summed it up. I think they've all blended really well. Be interesting to see now if they have a really good season, whether any of the big boys come knocking at the door, and then that'll be a test, But like I said, Sunderland's a big club outright. So if they can continue building on what they've started, the second half of the season, and all of a sudden, once you get to those points, will you be looking for Europe? I'm sure people will be saying that already,
Yeah, well, just on that topic, Paul, because some people won't thank us for mentioning this, but you were part of that Newcastle United side who were promoted to the Premier League and finished third in the first season after promotion. You played over 30 games that season. And, that newly promoted side, because the beginning of the season is almost just momentum, because, how difficult is it to keep that momentum going? Because there's almost an expectation that your form's just going to drop off at some point.
Yeah, I think you mentioned word expectation, and at the moment, I think if you spoke to most Sunderland people, their expectation was probably a bit like the manager. Let's make sure we stay there.
Hmm.
But then, as well as I do, all of a sudden expectations change. Whether it be a cup run or we're getting close to the top six, and then there's an expectation. Then there becomes pressure, because at the minute there's no pressure.
Hmm.
There's no pressure. And then that's when you find out again, can the young players handle it? And that's why the senior players have seen it and done it. Should stand them in good stead for that as well.
Yeah. Well, talking about that, keeping level-headed, the manager, Register Brice, he's very different to what we're used to in terms of successful managers at Sunderland. If you think about Dennis Smith, Sam Allardyce, Peter Reid, completely different nature that he's got. He's got a completely different temperament. But in terms of modern players in the modern game, is it more important to be like that now? Because I can imagine players in the modern game responding very differently to what they did, maybe 20, 30 years ago.
I think it still goes back to what we said before in terms of your man management of players. That's never going to change. It's 11v11. You've got to know the character of players. Has things changed? I think society's changed as a whole. Everybody sits on the phones. People now communicate, texting, and things like that. So you have to go with the modern era. But again, in terms of, as you've mentioned before, if you've got a good bond together as a team and a management, it's amazing what you can achieve. And again, they would have done the homework on the manager. Yes, he's quite calm, but I'll guarantee you underneath that, his legs will be going, like they say about the swan. And he's now probably at a stage now where he wants that 40 as quick as he can get there, and then see where I can go, see where I can take me.
Yeah. Well, looking at the game on Monday, I think a lot of the talk beforehand is obviously going to be about David Moyes' return at the Stadium of Light. You were, of course, his assistant manager during that relegation season. And a lot of focus was placed on his comments after a couple of games, saying we were already in a relegation battle, and people always seem to go back to that. It does suggest he was pretty disillusioned from almost the very beginning, because he'd only been there around a month when he made those comments. I mean, do you think it maybe wasn't the opportunity he thought it might be when he signed on the dotted line when he replaced Sam Allardyce?
Well, I think going back to my time, I think the advocate came in when Gus left, and I was asked to help go from the academy for Dick, and I think Dick had 11 or 12 games, and I always remember going to Arsenal and we needed a point to stay up. Unbelievable achievement. And then Dick was going to retire, as we all know, and then Dick came back and stayed on with him. And then obviously Dick left, and then Sam came in, and again, unbelievable season. The last two games, Roker Park was unbelievable. Again, the support, I think, played a major part in staying up. So it was always a fine line those last couple of seasons where could we stay again? And David came in, and it was a difficult job, not a lot of money, and having the club had been in that situation far too many times, and at some stage, it happened. He went down, but I know at the time, because the way he was probably being open and honest. People sometimes say you shouldn't be, but that's the way he was, and that's how we saw it. So I couldn't criticise him for it, because that was his thought.
Yeah. And another player to make his return is Jordan Pickford, who came through at Sunderland while you were at the club as well. And I think the club knew they had a talent coming through. But was there any thoughts that he could end up being England's top keeper for so many years like he has?
I think when you talk about the modern talk about pathways and young players, when you look at Jordan's, went non-league, went League 2, League 1, Championship, and Sam gave him his debut. I think it was Arsenal away in the cup, off the top of my head. And we always knew that he had a real future in front of him, and it was just a matter of time. And then once he got in, we knew he was going to stay in. And he's gone on and done brilliantly. Clean sheet. But I'm sure he'll get a great reception when he comes back. And I'm sure there's still a few more years in him. I mean, I was lucky because, like I said, at Everton, Neville Southland at the time was, he was one of the best goalkeepers in the world. And, Jordan's not at that level, but he's still a very, very good goalkeeper.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, just on Jordan Pickford, there's an argument that maybe, he stayed at Everton when he could have maybe looked at moving to a club maybe that regularly plays Champions League football. But he seems to have such a good relationship with the fans at Everton, and he's been there for over 8 years now, which is pretty rare. But it shows how happy he is, considering if he really wanted to push for a move, he probably could have gotten one.
Yeah, man. Everton's is a big club. And like you said, where's he going to go? It's a little bit of the saying down there: once the blue, always the blue. And I think he's got that. And I think he'll probably stay there the rest of his playing. I mean, when you look at Neville did the same. Neville was there, played something like 800 odd games or something like that, most appearances for a player. And I can see Jordan doing that as well. But like you said, I think he's signed a new contract. I think he's still got many, many years in him as well, And I'm, like I said before, I'm sure he'll get a great reception.
Yeah, that's it. But in terms of Monday's game, we kind of touched on Everton are on a run of winning just 1 in 6 and have lost the last 2 games in a row. Is it maybe more important for Everton on Monday just to not lose the game and maybe try and stop the run of results before it maybe spirals a little bit and then they become a little bit under pressure?
Yeah, I was at the game on Sunday, and it was a disappointing performance. Set plays, and I know David and the staff will be disappointed, but this is another opportunity. They'll know it's a big game. There'll be a massive crowd there, and like you said, it'll be a chance. Can he keep a clean sheet? Can he get a point on the board? From Sunderland's perspective, they're flying high, so it's going to be a real tough game. And I'm sure now, if David, like you said, talk about being honest, he would take a point now. I'm almost certain about that.
Yeah, it's all kind of set up, really, isn't it? It's one of those games where you see it from both sides. Both sides kind of are looking for a result for one reason or another. But it's all set up. It's got the extra kind of edge, I suppose, with David Moyes, Jordan Pickford. But it's one of those Monday night games. Actually, you think, yeah, that's almost a proper game, that, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure. Like you said, under lights, at the stadium, like full house, great atmosphere. Like I said, Sunderland flying. Everton need to get some points on the board, so it'll be a proper ding dong. I don't, there'll be some tackles flying about. I'm almost certain of that.
Yeah, especially maybe if there's a little bit of rain or something beforehand. And
well, these days they put the sprinklers on, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, but you don't see many sliding tackles, though. That's a problem.
Well.
But looking at Sunderland just very quickly, we've got 2 home games, and look, I'm going to get carried away for a second because I haven't had much chance over the last 30 years or so of being a Sunderland fan. But look, if Sunderland do manage to get 3 points on Monday, the next game sees Arsenal come to the Stadium of Light, which then should be really interesting. But look, you've been there and done it, as I said. You finished in the top 3 straight after promotion. How far can this Sunderland side go in? Because when you look at it, it's built on that foundation of being organised defensively rather than being swashbuckling and getting more goals than the opposition.
Well, I think you've answered the question there. The next 2 games will be really important because then I think you're going into the internationals again, and then you keep your fingers crossed that all the players come back from international. But the momentum's massive. The place will be jumping on Monday, and if you can continue doing that, it's always be a case when somewhere along the line you're going to get beat, and you might get beat again, and how you react and how you bounce back over the course of the season. Or you could be Arsenal goals all the way through and not lose a game. So you never know. You never know, and that's the beauty of the football Premier League. There's no easy games, and you just all of a sudden it's set up, and then all of a sudden results go even the teams below you, and then all of a sudden you're in a great position. But your momentum's definitely with Sunderland at the moment.
Yeah, that's it. Well, Leicester City have allowed us to believe, so we might get carried away for a few seconds. But yeah, actually, just on the last note, because we did talk to Gary Bennett recently, because I don't know if you've seen it over the last couple of years, but Sunderland have been playing in Hummel strips based on those that you played in for Sunderland, and of course this season's away strip is based on the blue one that you played in at St James's Park in that playoff.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, even though times have moved on, they're quite fashionable now as well, aren't they? So it must have been very fashionable in our time as well. But the colour's great, the kit's great. Like I said, at the moment, everything's rosy in the garden, as they say, Just got to make sure that you keep pulling the weeds out and keep the garden tidy.
Yeah, and we put to bed that the white strip because we won the playoff final that we lost the FA Cup final in, didn't we?
Yeah, and the white strip was always a favourite of the lads as well, with a little bit of red in there as well. No, it was... the Hummel was quite nice, and it's really good that they've managed to keep that. And like you said, it's been quite successful up to now.
Yeah, unfortunately, Gary Bennett told us that he threw his just before they moved to Hummel. He threw his away. He did a big clear out, and he chucked a load. He was absolutely gutted when they re-released it. But yeah, you mentioned you were at the Stadium Light for the Coventry game. Have you got any plans to get back up and see Sunderland?
Yes, I'm going to the game on Monday night. I've been invited. So I'm in Monty's table, which I'm looking forward to. I touched base with Borley because obviously delighted he's back as an ambassador, and obviously he's got the freedom of the city. So if I hang around with him, I'm sure I can get a glass of Coke. And obviously Ben was there, any of the ex-players. I saw Mickey Gray actually. Mickey was at to the Everton Stadium on Sunday. So it's always nice when you go back. But obviously I was delighted to get the invite.
Brilliant. Well, just leaves me to say, have a fantastic evening on Monday. Enjoy it. I hope you enjoy catching up with people, and hopefully, well, I'm not going to ask which way the result, but from our point of view, I hope the result goes right. But I'm sure you're going to remain neutral. But hope you have a fantastic night on Monday.
Smashing. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. And thanks again, everyone, for listening. We'll continue to preview the game either on the Roker Report website or in our daily releases on How the podcast right up to the morning of the game. So listen out for all of that, because we'll be back tomorrow with another How the podcast. But from us, bye for now.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.